Hey guys, Terrorizer here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the weapons of Monster Hunter World and what weapon might suit you. There are a lot of new players only hopping on Monster Hunter World for the first time as we move through the end of the year toward Monster Hunter Wilds. Obviously, there's also a lot of expert and veteran players who already know their tried and true weapon and what suits them the most. But this video should serve all audiences on what the weapons are like and why they're just so awesome in the first place. And to be clear, I will not be ranking the weapons in this video. I have made a couple weapon tier lists in the past. This is going to be more of a video where I really talk up every weapon on why they're so good, because there truly is no bad weapon in Monster Hunter. So that's enough Terra ranting out of the way. Let's get on to the first weapon and my personal favorite and the OG weapon of Monster Hunter. The Sword and Shield. A lot of people like to call the Sword and Shield a jack-of-all-trades weapon. It's a weapon that's really good with fast attack damage, it has really great mounting damage, and it also has blunt damage with the use of the shield. The Sword and Shield is lacking in range a bit, but it makes up for it with its lightning-quick attack speeds, and its very short or long combos depending on how hard you want to go in an instance. It's a weapon that virtually has little to no recovery on a lot of the attacks, and it's a weapon there you can really make up a lot of your own combos as all of the attacks kind of flow into each other. This weapon is also great because you're able to block with the shield, of course, it's in the name, and while it is a small shield, it gets the job done if you do need to hit that panic button. You can also eat and drink items while you're on the move and while it is unsheathed, so that also is the one bonus this weapon has over a lot of the other weapons. This weapon just covers every single aspect that you need, and it's a very fast weapon, and this weapon is just a monster, honestly, man. So to wrap up the Sword and Shield, not only is this weapon really fast, really strong, but it also has access to blunt damage for knockouts, mounting damage, guarding, the works. You really cannot go wrong with this weapon, and I really suggest you pick it up and give it a try. Next up, we have the contested OG weapon of Monster Hunter as well. The Greatsword has always been known for being a comically large sword, but in the fantasy setting, it just really hits right, and it really hits right. This weapon has the highest on-hit damage in the game, and there's no wonder why it has the word great in the name. Not only does this weapon have some of the highest damage in the game, but it's also a very fun weapon as it has a playstyle where you get to charge the swings of your attacks. Combine this with the playstyle of sitting in the monster's face and hitting it for the highest on-hit damage in the game, it has a risk-reward playstyle where you really need to understand the patterns of monsters to be able to land these really strong attacks. This weapon also has guarding and poise capabilities as you're able to guard monsters' attacks, but you're also able to use the hyper armor move, the tackle. A lot of weapons make very good use of monster knockdowns as well, but this weapon really shines above them. So if you like the idea of hitting monsters every so often, but hitting hard enough to make up for that time in between, this weapon might be for you. Next up, we have the Longsword. This is also a very OG weapon of Monster Hunter and one of my personal favorites and a fan favorite of everybody who's played this series. The Longsword is a very nice weapon. As it states in the name, it is a very long sword. Jokes aside, this is a weapon that hits very fast, has very good range, and is capable of some pretty good damage. This is a weapon that cannot block, however, but due to the mobility of this weapon and due to some of the counter options that this weapon has, you really are cooking some of these monsters. There's a lot of great counter options and even a special sheath stance which also has a counter tied to it and some other really unique moves. This is a weapon that is very easy to pick up for beginners, and not only is it good because of its good attack damage, its range, its speed of attack, but this weapon also has one of the highest skill ceilings in Monster Hunter. Yes, you heard me right. I think the Longsword is one of the hardest weapons to master, as you have to be a master at using the EI counters and the foresight slash to keep your red damage buff up on this weapon. So this is a weapon that can kind of be used with a more simple approach, but it's also very hard to master. Next up, we have the Dual Blades. The Dual Blades are also a very old weapon type of Monster Hunter. This is one of the faster weapon types in terms of actual attack speed with your slashes and combos. Just like the Sword and Shield, this weapon has some pretty short range, but you make up for that with some of the best mobility in Monster Hunter with its special demon stance and its dash attacks. But this is a weapon that does rely on the stamina gauge for most of its damage. But that doesn't mean this weapon is bad. On the contrary, this is actually one of the best weapons in Monster Hunter for dealing out huge damage. When you really know how to manage your stamina right and you're very good at playing that very movement heavy playstyle, this weapon really shines. Just like the Longsword, this is a weapon that also gains access to stronger attacks as you just use the basic attacks of this weapon. The stamina consumption does come from an extra stance that this weapon has, which you're mainly utilizing for the good damage that you want to be dishing. So if you like the idea of being very quick and agile, but also managing your stamina to be putting out that good damage, and through the use of using two different stances to manage that stamina, this weapon is a very fun choice, and it's also one of the top contenders for the highest damage in the game. The hammer is also a very OG weapon of Monster Hunter, and while it isn't most players' first choice, this weapon is definitely heard from loud and clear by the community behind this weapon. As you might have guessed, the hammer is a weapon that deals a lot of blunt damage, and if you didn't know, in Monster Hunter, blunt damage to the monster's skulls results in a knockout from time to time, which is basically a knockdown. This is another weapon that is a bit short on its reach, but it does a huge amount of damage on those said knockouts that you will be getting with this weapon. But you might be surprised to learn that it actually has surprising mobility as well. This is a weapon that is great for single player, but really shines in multiplayer by being able to help your teammates by getting out these knockouts with all the blunt damage that you're doing. This weapon also has extremely great slope and jump attacks, resulting in some really flashy attacks, but also some really good damage. Like I said earlier, the hammer isn't the first choice of many hunters on their first go around of Monster Hunter, but I promise you this weapon has a lot more going for it than meets the eye. If you like the idea of knocking out monsters for your teammates, or just by going oonga boonga on the monster's skull, then you definitely should give the hammer a try. Next up, we have one of the most respected weapons in all of Monster Hunter, the Hunting Horn. The Hunting Horn is a weapon that is akin and very similar to the hammer. The Hunting Horn also puts out blunt damage, but also cranks some sick tunes for you and your allies. Whether you're bringing your Palico along with you or you're actually playing in a squad, this weapon can provide buffs for you and your teammates ranging from damage up to health regenerative skills, or just by straight healing or with wind resistance. You get the idea. Your hunter will automatically strum notes as you are attacking with this weapon, but every attack has a specific note that gets played, and to get these buffs for your allies, you need to be playing the right tune. So the Hunting Horn is a very cool and unique weapon that actually varies depending on the hunting horn that you're using, as they all have their own different notes. While some notes are similar from hunting horn to hunting horn, having one hunting horn may not be suitable for every single monster that you're fighting in the game, which for me is actually a big plus, because that allows players to customize more and really express themselves through this weapon. The Hunting Horn's attacks are a bit sluggish and slow, but it does have fast movement outside of that. So if you like a weapon where you have to actually think about the combo that you're doing to get the right buff for you or your teammates, this weapon might be for you. Next up, we have another OG weapon of the Monster Hunter series, which is the Lance. The Lance is an extremely underrated weapon in Monster Hunter. It has one of the lowest usage rates in the game, but this weapon is an absolute defense and offense monster. We all know the saying that the best offense is a great defense and vice versa. So if I told you this is a weapon that can really stick it to the monster while defending yourself. And that pun is intended. You really are sticking to the monster. You're staying up close with this weapon because it has one of the best shielding and defensive capabilities in the game, with the largest shield, of course. And because of the shield, you're able to do a lot of counter attacks with the Lance, and also just have really good guarding capabilities in general, which allows you to stay up close and rewards a more defensive playstyle over a more evasive playstyle. Now, the combos with this weapon aren't anything to write home about, as you're mostly just doing the old stabby on the monster. But this weapon has really good range. It has pinpoint accuracy on where you want to be attacking. And some players may think that this weapon is a bit more of a slow, methodical playstyle, but it really isn't. When you know what you're doing with this weapon, you really can't just be hitting the monster over and over and over again. And this is actually a weapon that I will take up against some of the strongest monsters in the game, because I know it usually can get the job done. So if you like the idea of sticking to the monster, doing the old stabby, but also having good timing to guard and to counter and predict the monster's attacks while you're up next to it, this weapon is a very underrated, and I highly suggest you give it a try. Also, you can dash around with this weapon, which is pretty sick. Next up, we have a personal favorite weapon of mine and an old weapon of the Monster Hunter series, the Gunlance. Now, it isn't the typical gun like the Bowguns you would think of in Monster Hunter. We'll get to those in a little bit. Now, this is a weapon that is very akin and similar to the Lance as well, but has the ability to explode along the blade of the weapon, dealing a fixed amount of damage so that no matter where you're hitting the monster, if it's in a good spot or a bad spot, this weapon always does the same amount of damage with its explosions. This is another strong shield weapon just like the Lance, but this weapon has more of an offensive playstyle going for it. Some of the animations on this weapon can be a bit slow, and this weapon does lose sharpness very easily, which is very important in Monster Hunter. But if you can see past those facts and really understand what this weapon has to bring to the table with its really fun, unique playstyle that can dish a lot of damage in the right and capable hands, this weapon is absolutely amazing and very unique. But this weapon, like the hunting horn, truly is a work of art, as you get to choose which damage you want to be dealing at a time, whether it's slashing damage or shelling damage through the explosions. This is a weapon that also makes use of really well-timed knockdowns, and has a very fun playstyle where you're switching between the types of attack depending on where you are with the monster, or whether it's a certain monster that you're fighting, and the actual type of gunlance that you use, as there are different shelling types to suit your playstyle. So if you want a playstyle that's very unique and you actually get to choose whether you like the shelling or the lance attacks more, or you like a little combination of both, this weapon is also really awesome. Next up, we have a switch axe. This is a weapon that was introduced in Monster Hunter Tri, and it's also been a favorite of mine ever since. As the name might imply, this is a weapon that actually switches between two attack modes. It's not similar to the dual blades with two different stances. This weapon literally switches what the weapon is capable of doing with the press of a button or through certain combo strings. The main playstyle of this weapon is you start off in axe mode. You can power up the axe mode, or you can switch over to the sword mode whenever you want, and through that mode you can charge up your own gauge, expend a bunch of energy, but once the sword mode's gauge gets too low, you're going to have to get back to axe mode. It's kind of a nice playstyle where you actually switch back and forth as you want without really a whole lot of restrictions. You are still managing a gauge with the two different weapon playstyles, but they both kind of have their own power-ups going for them, so you really can play this weapon how you like. I personally like to play the axe mode, for instance, which is pretty fun and unique. This weapon doesn't have a whole lot of defensive capabilities, but this weapon is capable of dishing out a ton of damage and is a pure offense machine. So if you want to be playing two different playstyles and just going ham on the monster, this weapon is also really cool and super flashy, and I can't recommend this weapon more for players who want two different playstyles in one while just being a pure offense machine. So if the switch axe sounds up your alley, then you should give it a try. Next up, we have the Charge Blade, very akin to the Switch Axe as well, as this is a weapon that uses two different playstyles. One is a playstyle that is similar to the Sword and Shield, but has a bigger shield and a bigger sword. It's not as agile as the Sword and Shield, but this is very similar to it in a lot of the attacks that it does. The same thing happens with the Charge Blade. You charge up your blade while you are in the Sword and Shield mode, and then you can stick the energy that you're getting and store it into the shield, which can be utilized through its axe mode to deal really big damage. And that's only one of the playstyles you can play with this weapon, as this weapon kind of has three playstyles. It has a sword charge up mode. There's a playstyle where you expend all of your built up energy into one big damaging attack over and over again. There's also a weapon that expends the energy over time through its Savage Axe mode. Now this is actually one of the hardest weapons in the game to master. It's a very big weapon management playstyle where you need to be managing the energy that you're storing in the proper way that you want to. The combos also are not very intuitive, but this weapon is capable of dishing out some of the highest damage in Monster Hunter. It has shield counters through some of its own attack animations as you are switching between sword and shield and the axe mode. So if you want to play a weapon where you're really managing your energy and how you want to expend it in the playstyle that you want, this weapon might be for you, but it definitely is not for the faint of heart. This is a very hard weapon, you guys, but the Charge Blade remains one of the best weapons in Monster Hunter, and it's for a very good reason. Next up, we have the Insect Glaive. The Insect Glaive is one of the more unique weapons in Monster Hunter, as you have this bug companion attachment on your arm actually called the Kinsect. This is a weapon that is very similar to the Charge Blade, but the Kinsect actually does all the energy gathering for you, and that's where you get a lot of your buffs from. You can send the Kinsect to fly out and attack the monster for you, and depending on the parts of the monster that you hit, you can call the Kinsect back to store certain buffs onto your hunter, which lasts for a certain amount of time. There's a few different types of buffs that your Kinsect can get for you, most importantly the damage buff, but getting all these buffs at the same time will result in an even bigger buff to your hunter, and that's where the weapon management playstyle really comes in with this. This weapon is extremely agile though, as this weapon is able to access the air from a pole vault. It has really cool and flashy aerial attacks that deal very good mount damage for getting an eventual knockdown on a monster, but this weapon is also dishing out really good damage on the ground with a very thrust halberdy playstyle. So if you want to be dealing really good damage on the ground, but also soaring through the skies with access to the jump at any moment, this weapon might be for you, especially if you like managing your own attack combos while managing your Kinsect at the same time. Next up, we have the Light Bowgun. There are two bowguns in Monster Hunter World, but we're starting with the smaller but more evasive one. The Light Bowgun is a very fun weapon, as you get to choose what kind of damage you want to be dealing, what kind of ailment you want to be applying on the monster, all through the use of ammo that you can equip. This is a weapon that has access to really good crowd control, as you can equip ammo like sleep ammo or paralysis ammo to really lock the monster down for you or your teammates. Not only is it a very good crowd control choice, but this weapon also keeps you at a good distance from the monster, so it's a bit of a safer playstyle as well. Managing your ammo can be a bit tough though. It requires the use of very good menu navigating, which is pretty easy in Monster Hunter if you know how to do it, but for a lot of newer players it is a bit much to manage when you're actually in the heat of a hunt. Now the damage isn't as strong as its counterpart, which we will be getting to next, but the combination of having really good movement, really good evading tactics, range damage, crowd control, this weapon is a big favorite of mine, as you really can't sit back and relax while you play it. And there are plenty of play styles where you are dishing out mad damage if you know how to utilize this weapon properly. Next up, the counterpart to the light bowgun, we have the heavy bowgun. This weapon has access to extremely high damage, and some consider this weapon to be the easy mode of Monster Hunter. This weapon actually has access to a shield mod, which you can equip on the weapon. And we are talking about mods in the game, you guys. The bowguns are capable of custom modifications to also alter your play style, which is also another reason why you might want to pick up one of these ranged behemoths. But the heavy bowgun has a wide variety of attacks that you can unleash due to the ammo that you can equip for this weapon, just like the light bowgun. This weapon is also very technical, as you have to be good with the menu management. The main difference between the heavy bowgun and the light bowgun is you are dealing a lot more damage with this weapon, but you are a lot more vulnerable and you are a lot slower, as this weapon is heavy, like the name implies. But if you want to play from a ranged distance, just like the light bowgun, but you want to be dishing out more damage, then the heavy bowgun is also a very good choice. Last but not least, we have the bow. Bows in Monster Hunter are actually very large and use very large arrows to hit your opponents. Unlike the bow guns in Monster Hunter though, the bow actually has an unlimited amount of arrows that you can use, so the bow is actually a nice range choice if you don't want to deal with a whole lot of different ammo types, but the bow does have special coatings that you can apply to your arrows to get special status effects as you like. So the bow also has decent crowd control ability, but the bow does put a hamper on your stamina meter. Similar to the dual blades, the bow actually has really good mobility at the cost of some stamina meter, which leads to a stamina management playstyle. But having the nice ranged playstyle with the bow, like the bow guns, but also a similarity to the dual blades where you're playing very evasively, makes this a kind of nice hybrid weapon in between those playstyles. The bow also has very fast movement in general, and it has really good damage uptime if you can dance around the monster through the use of its evasive tactics. So if you like the idea of managing your stamina just like the dual blades by having ranged options and really great mobility and good damage uptime, then this weapon also might be for you. While monster is in the name of Monster Hunter, I feel like the weapons truly are the soul of the series. Everybody gets to choose their own favorite weapon with its unique play style to really suit their needs and to express themselves. What makes the weapons in Monster Hunter very special, in my opinion as well, is compared to a lot of other game series out there, the weapons in this game, there really is no bad weapon. All these weapons are capable of dishing out really good damage, but also have very unique play styles. There's a reason why there's a cult behind the hammer, or the very respected but few hunting horn players, or one of the most used weapons, the longsword. It gets a lot of attraction, but for really good reason, as it's a very easy to pick up weapon, but very hard to master. As for my favorite weapon in Monster Hunter, it's really hard to choose most of the time because there just simply are too many good choices. So I hope I was able to shed light on why these weapons are so awesome in the first place and what weapon might be for you. So that is going to do it for today, guys and gals. I hope you enjoyed the video. All I have left to ask is, which weapon did you think was the most exciting in this video? Which weapon do you think is the hardest to master? And if you're already playing or played Monster Hunter before, what is your favorite weapon? Please let me know in the comments down below. I'm very eager to read your responses, as going into the future for Monster Hunter and heading into the next game, Monster Hunter Wilds, I feel like the weapons are going to get a lot of attraction before that game even releases. But that is it for today's video, guys and gals. I'm signing off. This has been Terroriza, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace!